Good evening and welcome, everybody. Welcome to Entrepreneurship to the Point. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today to speak about POPI, the Personal Information Act. We will be starting at about 2 minutes past. We're just going to give everybody an opportunity to jump on the call. Okay, welcome to Entrepreneurship to the Point. It's so wonderful to see everybody on this call tonight. My name is Tebogo Marite, and I am the Content and Events Manager. I'm also an Information Officer looking after the POPI stuff inside our organization, because just like any other big or small business, we have also been working very hard to make sure that we can keep up with, understand, and implement what it is that we need to do when it comes to the Protection of Personal Information Act. So that is what we are going to be covering tonight. It's going to be a really informative session. Please make sure that you've got a pen and paper with you, but also make sure that you're ready to type in that chat section, ready to ask us questions. We have brought on board skilled experts in order to provide us with all of the information that we need, or as much as we possibly can pull together. So please do engage with us in the chat section. Just a little bit about how the evening is going to run. So I'm going to just give a little bit of context and an introduction to the speakers who are going to be joining us this evening, Moshimi and Tyrone. When I'm done with that, I'm going to hand over to Moshimi, who has prepared a pre-recorded introduction to the legalities of what POPI is. She's going to really give us an understanding of what the Act is all about, what it means, and what some of the descriptions are, as well as the exclusions, limitations, and of course, what happens if you don't comply. Once we have played that 10-minute pre-recorded session, she is available live online to answer any questions that you may have. So what I encourage you to do is type the questions in the chat section as they come. I do have members of my team in the chat section who will be fielding those through to me, and we will then be able to field them to Moshimi. She's also, though, obviously seeing the chat. And if there's questions that are coming through that she can answer on the spot, she'll be able to do that as well. Once she has completed her presentation, we will move on to Tyrone Phillips. He is a Microsoft engineer, and he will be telling us about all of the IT requirements and intricacies, which really is where a lot of the anxiety is, especially for small businesses, in understanding what is it that you have to have in place, what is it that you have to change, and what is it that you can perhaps no longer do as a small business owner when it comes to how you deal with the personal information of your clients. And then at the end of that session, we will again take some questions, and then wrap up the session. We are streaming live on YouTube. So if you have got any friends, if you've got colleagues who you think should really be tuning into the session, you're welcome to just open another tab, go to our YouTube channel, or maybe I'll just ask somebody from our team to do that for us and pop it in the chat. You can share that as broadly as you want. If you missed anything in today's session, or if you need a recap, you can certainly also go back to our YouTube channel and recap on what you have missed. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome and introduce our first speaker for this evening, Ms. Moshami Chetty, an old friend of Property Point and Entrepreneurship to the Point. She has helped many of our businesses in order to navigate the legal landscape as a small business. We know that a lot of times, sometimes contracting and the legalities, we kind of leave for last, but we all know how very crucial making sure that you've got the right legalities in place for your small business is. And Moshami and her team at Aria Legal make sure that they can provide that service in a way that makes sense to the small business owner. She's got over 14 years of experience in the space, and I know that her passion really is in working with small businesses and entrepreneurs. Moshami, I'm going to ask you to just switch on your camera and give us a quick wave before you, just so that everybody can see you, and then you can go ahead and share your presentation.
Thanks, Teboho. I think I actually can't turn on my video because it's disabled.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay, cool. I'll stop sharing.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. I'm going to share my presentation with you. Hi, everyone. My name is Moshami Chetty. I'm an attorney with 15 years of experience, and I work almost exclusively with entrepreneurs and small businesses. My business is called Aria Legal, and I've been asked to give a short introduction today about what the actual legislation is that governs the protection of personal information. So I'm going to give you a few definitions. The slides are going to be a little bit wordy, but that's because I want to be able to share these with you so that you'll have all of these definitions with you on hand for the rest of today's event, as well as for the future when you try and get POPI compliant in your business. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a short introduction to the Protection of Personal Information Act. So as we know, there's a very important deadline looming. That's the 1st of July, 2021, and that is the date by which we must all be compliant as small businesses, and the date by which POPI will be properly enforced. And I suppose that's what. So what is the purpose of POPI broadly? There are 4 broad purposes. The first is to promote the protection of personal information. The second is to balance the right of privacy within the Constitution with the various needs and interests that living in a bustling economy would demand of us, and living within the digital age would demand of us. So obviously we know the more and more business and our interactions get digital, the more risk there is of breaches to our privacy, and the more risk there is of breaches to our personal information. Thirdly, it's to regulate the manner in which personal information may be processed. So we're going to delve into what the definition of processing is later, but it's very, very broad. But of course, POPI is there to tell us and regulate how we may deal with personal information. And lastly, it is to establish voluntary and compulsory measures, including the establishment of the information regulator. And the information regulator is effectively the enforcement body that lies behind POPI. And I think everyone knows POPI was passed many years ago, but it's taken a number of years to get the proper infrastructure ready in order to make sure that it's properly enforced and that members of the public can rely on it effectively. So what is POPI concerned with? I think if you just understand this one slide, you'll have quite a good idea of what POPI entails. And so it deals with the collection, storage, use, and destruction of personal information. And it also deals with, broadly, the owner's consent. And so we must know who we're collecting information about, why we're collecting information about them, when we've collected information and how long we must store that information for, and how we may process that information. So this is quite a handy slide in order to get a really, really brief and broad overview about what POPI is concerned with. The next major question is, what is personal information? That can also be a matter that confuses the layperson. So this is the definition of personal information. It's information relating to an identifiable living natural person, but where it is applicable, an identifiable existing juristic person. So POPI is unusual in that it applies sometimes to juristic persons. So where in the Act it says it applies to a company or CC, or in another Act it may provide that it applies to a company or CC, that can be the case. It involves information relating to race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, national, ethnic, or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental health, well-being, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and the birth of the person. It includes information relating to medical, financial, criminal, employment history, any identifying number, symbol, email address, physical address, telephone number, location information, online identifier, or particular assignment to that person. So obviously in your line of business, this is particularly the kind of personal information that you process, biometric information, personal views, opinions, or preferences, correspondence of a person that is explicitly or implicitly private or of a confidential nature, views and opinions of that person, the name of the person if it appears with other information that would allow them to be identified. Also, another category called special personal information, which includes religious or philosophical beliefs, race or ethnic origin, trade union membership, political persuasion, health or sex life or biometric information, information relating to the commission of a crime or an offense, and there are special rules when it comes to special personal information. So if you are collecting this, might imagine due to much for other legislation, you are collecting information about race or ethnic origin, it must be done with consent. It might, or if it's necessary in the law, or if it's done for historical, statistical, or research purposes, or if the information has deliberately been made public. So I suppose when it comes to your industry, the catch-all get out of jail free card for collecting this kind of information is that you may be doing it for historical, statistical, or research purposes. So I think the question that I touched earlier is, what is processing? What does processing in fact mean? It's again very, very broad and includes every conceivable action that you can think of. So collecting information, receiving it, storing it, updating it, modifying it, disseminating it, even destroying it is considered a form of processing. That's entered in a record. A record is any form that's in possession of or control of a company or public body, irrespective of whether they created it. So I think that's quite key to understand that even if you are receiving information, storing it on behalf of someone else, you will be considered to be processing it. There's two other key definitions within the Act that have slightly different responsibilities. So the responsible party is a public or private body or any other person which alone or in conjunction with others determines the purpose and means of processing of personal information. So the responsible party is the person who decides the reason why personal information is processed. So it may be whoever is commissioning a specific environmental study would be the responsible party who says, these are the reasons why we're collecting and processing this information. An operator, on the other hand, is a person who processes personal information for a responsible party in terms of a contract or mandate, without coming under the direct authority of the party. So they're not an employee. It could be like you, commissioned by Shell or some other company to do an environmental assessment. You are an operator as long as you're merely acting on that person's instructions. The moment that you determine the purpose for processing of the information yourself, you would then be also a responsible party. So I've given the example of MailChimp because it's a really neat example. They are operators in the sense that you may have an emailing list that you've got permission to use, and you've got permission for specific purposes, but MailChimp would be the operator who stores and disseminates emails on your behalf. So how does the legislation protect the consumer or the public? The data subject, so the person whose information is being collected, can expect that the information will be properly handled, processed, and shared, and the legislation empowers the individual to ensure that their details are not shared randomly or sold or distributed without the explicit consent, and also gives them the opportunity to opt out without the risk of a lack of access to financial services, for example. They can also ask for specific information about what is held about them and the purposes for which it's held, and ask for it to be. So there are some exclusions within the Act where POPI does not affect the processing of personal information. That's where it's purely personal or household activities. So if you're collecting names and contact details for a child's birthday party, this doesn't apply to you. If it's been de-identified to the extent it can't be resurrected, that's an important exclusion. If it's by the state, if it's for journalistic purposes, etc., or if it's been specifically excluded. This is another important slide, and it's the end of my presentation for today. These are the 8 conditions for lawful processing of personal information. There must be accountability. There must be processing limitations. There must be purpose specifications. So you must know why a person must know why you're processing the information. If there's further processing, that must be limited to the original reason why you process the information. The information quality must be good. There must be openness and transparency. There must be very clear security safeguards in place. And there must be participation by a person, both at the time that you collect the information and for any further processing, or in the process of asking the person, or allowing the person to ask why you have the information, what information you hold for them, and how long you'll hold it. So that's my very, very brief introduction to really, really broad strokes what POPI is about, and hopefully we'll have time in the session to get into a little bit more detail and for you to ask me some questions. Thank you.
Moshe, yeah, I almost jumped in to ask some questions there. The pre-record worked really, really well. Thank you so much for that. I see, I'm sure that everybody is just trying to digest everything before they come back to you with some questions, and we will have more time later on to ask questions as well. I see Marshall has his hand up. Marshall, would you mind just typing your question in the chat for us? Or Moshe, do you mind if I give Marshall an opportunity to just ask on camera?
I think it's perfectly fine. We're a nice.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. I think you are able to put on your microphone and go ahead with your question, Marshall.
Hi, thank you, family. I'm Marshall Nelson from Mitchell's Plain. The organization is called Youth Media Movement. I just wanted to know, thanks for that. Yeah, it was blown away. How best do we basically empower businesses in our community to really understand the POPI Act? Because based on the information you gave us, I don't think many entrepreneurs and small businesses in our communities does understand how these legalities work around the POPI Act. What would you maybe say would be the best way? Because I can see government is not doing enough in terms of getting this POPI Act out. What do you think would be a way that we could basically empower our communities to, especially the entrepreneurs, to look at this POPI Act and take it very much serious to protect themselves?
I think when it comes to township entrepreneurs, etc., it would be a good idea to see if there's a way of replicating or doing a little bit of a pared down version of a workshop like this in that space, or to get really, really simple educational information available to them, where really you're dealing with the top line information of what is personal information, do I collect it, do I process it, what is the potential outcomes for me if there's any data breach, and how do I try and get compliant. Again, when it comes to something like POPI, any new form of legislation that has like a type of, that you can get in trouble for not complying with, we don't know how serious the public's going to take it. We don't know how many complaints are going to come forward, because these are really, it's more individual driven complaints than, having an enforcement body in the sense of the police behind it. So we don't really know yet how big of an impact it's going to have on small businesses. But we're hoping, at least we're seeing that people are going to take it quite seriously. So I'd be happy to have a chat with you about a workshop for those businesses, or trying to get some educational information that's available to them in a way that they can understand.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Sorry, my apologies, Marshall. I pressed the button while you were saying thank you.
I wanted to say thanks for that. Much appreciated. It really is going to help us in so many ways, because I don't think most of our young our entrepreneurs and so on in these townships understand the legalities and what their businesses can fail if they don't comply. Because I do understand there is a officer that also, a POPI officer that also needs to be appointed and stuff like that. So there's lots of legalities regarding this that I think we're all not well aware of.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you so much, Marshall. I think the first step, to answer that, after this session, that link will be available simply on our YouTube channel. And, a person will be able to get that brief introduction. And if they do have some follow-up information, they'll be able to reach out to Moshmi as well, as her details were there. I'm seeing a question about practical things that businesses can implement to comply, email disclaimers, notes on websites. I think Ty is going to cover some of those, but is there like a basic set of documents legally that a person should have in place, almost like a template that you can think of, or is that, would that be unique to each business, or where should one start from the legal perspective?
Sure. So that's a very good question, Corinne, and you've added to it in a very meaningful way, Teboho. I think what you would want to start with is an audit of your business to find out what personal information you're collecting in the first place, and to understand the purposes for which you process it and whether you've gotten the right legitimate reasons to process that information. So it would either be consent, or in terms of a contract, or in terms of a law, etc. So the very first thing you want to do is conduct an audit, and I'm happy to share a top-line audit document with you that would get you started on that process. It's hard to do a template for your POPI and privacy policy from the perspective that every business will be quite different. So that document will arise out of the audit that you've conducted, because every business processes personal information differently. And then what you want to do is make sure that you've gotten the correct, or you're processing information for the correct purpose, you've gotten the correct legal basis for processing that information, and the data subjects are all well aware of it. And there are certain rights that they need to be made aware of, including their right to information, their right to get a copy of the data that you hold about them, etc. What is fairly templatized is the PIA document. So PIA is the Promotion of Access to Information Act. And it's quite an old act. It's been around for a long time. All businesses are required to have a PIA request document manual, PIA manual. But PIA is the process through which you request whether someone holds information from you. So PIA documents fairly standard. You should have that available on your website, or have someone appointed who can make that available to all of your clients. So your PIA manual and your POPI policy will go hand in hand. It's a little bit easier if you have like a website that's like an e-commerce website. Then you would want a privacy notice, and that can be broad enough. You can find some that are broad enough to cover you. What else should we be doing? You will need definitely to, in the process of getting that audit done, you'll then identify which departments deal with what, and you will want to make sure that it's not just your information officer that is appointed, and you do have to appoint that person, not just your information officer who is well-versed about POPI. Every team that interacts with personal information must understand their role, so that they are not inadvertently breaching people's privacy rights. So I hope that that's given you a bit of an understanding of what that process would look like.
Yeah, I think it has, and I mean, I think the whole purpose is to say, you've really got to understand the fundamentals, which is, do you know why you are asking for information, and does the person who you are asking for information from also know and understand and consent? So yeah, thank you so much for that motion. We will follow up with you on some of the documents that you are able to share. And I think what you've said is also important, because there's a lot of information online. I like what you've mentioned about the POPI Act, which I think maybe, we can advise everybody to go and look at those kind of original documents, because the other challenge is, as soon as July 1st happened, everybody was an expert. And you really, as a small business, didn't know where to look and who was just kind of trying to sell in a new consulting thing. So I think sometimes it is always important to just try and look at those original brief. I don't know if I missed it or if you mentioned it in your preso, but what are kind of the maximum and minimum ramifications? I imagine that there's a lot of variations depending on what you do, but what's kind of what we should know that could happen if there's a breach?
Right. Worst case scenario is that you get in a prison period of 10 years or up to 10 million Rand fine, or a combination of the two. So it can be, it's not or, it can also be and. So those are quite serious. That would completely cripple a small business.
Of course, yeah. And I don't imagine that perhaps there would be leeway, if you're a small business and maybe you can kind of justify, no?
I don't know how, we don't have, we don't have any case law, for want of a better word. We don't know how the information regulator is going to interpret certain things or manage certain things. We don't know how lenient or harsh she's going to be. I'd imagine she can issue certain directives, depends on the size of the breach, the level of the failure to comply, etc. I don't think it's going to be 10 years in prison and 10 million Rand off the bat. But we don't know yet. We really don't.
And we don't want anyone on this call to be the first example. So, okay, thank you so much, Moshimi. I see that there's one more question from Karine. I think if you can just give as quick of an answer as you can to that, and then immediately after that, you can turn off your camera, and I'm going to hand straight over to Tyrone for his section.
Right. So another good question. You don't need to get fresh consent per se, but the difficulty is that none of us were adhering to POPI at a time when it wasn't in place. So while some of us may have gotten emails, etc., specifically, I'm collecting your email for marketing purposes or to give you a 10% discount, but most of us weren't properly managing those databases. What we were doing is offering someone a 10% discount and then using that email for redirected marketing. So I think your best case, your best practice would be to just give people the ability to opt in again.
Okay. Thank you, Moshimi. Thanks so much. That was great, guys. If some of the initial information was a little bit complex, and if you have any questions, our next speaker is Tyrone. I'm going to introduce him to you quickly. So Tyrone Phillips, also, he's been with Property Point and Entrepreneurship to the Point longer than I've been. Ty, you let us know how long you've been walking these IT streets. He is a certified Microsoft engineer and IT enthusiast, and he has successfully operated and ran Elevate IT for over 17 years, catering to the needs of IT needs of SMEs across the country. Again, Ty is also a friend of Entrepreneurship to the Point and Property Point. Actually, a lot of our POPI work and a lot of the transitions and things that we have had to do as an organization, Tyrone has really held our hand through that process and enabled us to comply as much as we can, and what he knows about how you can be in line with POPI from an IT perspective. Ty, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tebogo. Let me just get my camera on here. Where are we? All right, perfect. Start video. Tebogo just information differently. So this would be very much based on a business by business aspect. To identify and reasonably foresee internal and external risks to personal information in your possession or under your control. Again, reasonably foreseeable. The POPI Act stipulates this. It doesn't stipulate anything specifically. There's no checklist. There's nothing available to say, you have to do X, Y, Z. It just talks about reasonable, foreseeable measures that you have to put in place. So just keep that in mind. And once you've identified this information, now the responsibility on the business is to establish and maintain appropriate safeguards against these risks identified. And that's obviously where, unfortunately, each business has the responsibility to put these safeguards in place. All right, so we'll move on to the topics for this evening. All right, first and foremost, cybersecurity. This is obviously something that every business has to go through. You have to ensure that any information system that you've got, your computers, whatever devices where you store, so cybersecurity is a fundamental that you need to ensure that. Data security. So we'll move on to, once you identify the data, the sensitive information being internal and external, what safeguards have you put in place to ensure the security of that data? And data loss prevention. So we'll go through all of these in a little bit more detail in the next slides, but these are the basically fundamentals. There's a lot more to it, but we obviously wanted to keep it as short as possible, just to give you the fundamental aspects. So it gives you something to start off with. All right, so let's get into data security. So endpoint protection. All right, first and foremost, if you're a business, if you have computers, and almost every business does, you need to have some sort of endpoint protection. Endpoint is just a fancy name for an antivirus. And it's important that you consider this seriously. You need to have something in place that can deal with modern day threats. Unfortunately, threats today are very advanced. The people out there behind these threats are writing them are trying to get your information. They're trying to get into your systems, and they're trying to plant, modern day threats like ransomware. They come in with exploits, anything that can get into your system. So having some sort of endpoint protection that's at least that has some credibility. A lot of free products out there, which is obviously for small businesses is a little bit easier to obtain, but unfortunately they don't really provide the adequate protection that you need. But vendors, there are multiple vendors out there offering security, and prices do vary. So it's something to look at and find something that fits your business. Perimeter security, UTM. UTM basically stands for Unified Threat Management. So if you have a premises, if you have a business and you have a network, if you have servers or computers on a network, chances are you have some sort of internet connectivity, being it a high-speed Wi-Fi or a fiber. Perimeter security is basically the gateway between the internet and your business. So perimeter security devices basically scan information coming in and out of your business. A lot of small businesses we come across have got a basic router that's installed by the ISP. And although this does have some sort of port blocking abilities, all it's really doing is stopping a hacker from basically getting access into your network. What it doesn't do, unfortunately, is scan the traffic for any payloads. So what would happen is a ransomware, an email comes through into your business or one of your staff members, and it's got a ransomware attachment. And the next thing you know, you've got all your data is encrypted and you've been held to ransom. That would be debilitating for any small business. So if you have the means for it, if you have the budget for it, some sort of perimeter security device is recommended. Network security. So network security is something that, these are very, very much like the basics, but you can go into it. Network security covers a whole lot of aspects in the business. The fundamentals are very, very basic habits that you need to get in place. We come across businesses all the time where laptops, computers, servers don't have any password policies. There's no password policies or any adequate password policies. 123 or password 123 is not considered an adequate password. So, have some sort of password policy, set password standards within your business if you can, and, communicate this to your staff. So that everybody knows that, to secure your computers, to secure your devices, that you've got some sort of if it's a tablet or a phone, have a pattern, have a complex pattern, have a password, have something in place. And this doesn't cost anything. It's just a small security measure that goes a long way into securing the device. Almost every small business has Wi-Fi today. If you are in an environment with a router of some sort, Wi-Fi passwords, again, far too often the Wi-Fi password is generic. It's just the same password that was delivered with the device, or we come across a lot of small businesses that have just got very basic passwords. It doesn't take a hacker very long, or someone with a little bit of IT savvy, to hack through a Wi-Fi password. And once they're in, they're pretty much into your network. Once they're in your network, then they can drop a payload like ransomware, or pretty much hack into your information system. And that information is now vulnerable to them, and they can use that for whatever their purposes are. With COVID now, remote access is a reality for a lot of businesses. So, remote access does provide a certain level of complexity when it comes to security. Obviously people are working from home in remote locations, so it's quite difficult to secure from, the previous point I spoke about, perimeter security. That's not always practical in terms of remote access. But if you have a business and you have servers, or you have a data store of some sort, and your employees do need to come through into the business, you need to make sure that that remote access is secure. VPNs are obviously something that is preferable. A VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. These usually provide some sort of 2FA or multi-factor authentication. So it would obviously limit the ability of a hacker to get through that remote access. And if you can, manage it through a perimeter security UTM, if you have got the budget for that, the traffic that comes through on that remote access is scanned for viruses and for malware, which could potentially compromise the data. BYOD basically stands for bring your own device. This is quite a commonplace term in businesses today, where small businesses allow their staff to use their own personal laptops, tablets, etc., for use within the business. This does provide a little bit of a problem and an issue for small businesses, as you need to ensure that these devices that come into your network, either remotely or on premise, have got adequate security. And again, I talk about endpoint security, endpoint protection, to make sure that you have some sort of policy in place. Draft a very basic network policy to, information security policy, just to ensure that anybody that is on your network, that you've got some checks and balances in place. All right, web protection. So web protection goes, this is an aspect of all businesses have an issue with. If you can put certain safeguards in place to restrict people within your business accessing unauthorized locations. You can't have people on your business accessing peer-to-peer sites, torrent sites. These are downloads, dangerous downloads that can bring malware, that can open your network up to exploits, to ransomware, to threats that can obviously compromise your data. These are all threats that need to be taken seriously. So if with a perimeter security UTM and a decent endpoint protection, a lot of these tools they overlap a bit. But you can set restrictions in place to ensure that staff or anybody within your business that has access to information that is of a sensitive nature is not accessing information, not accessing sites or applications outside on the internet that could potentially compromise your business or compromise your data. All right, and phishing and fraud. A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people have come across the term phishing before. Now, phishing is quite a common term these days, and it's basically phishing translates to the following. Phishing is a cyber attack that uses disguised email as a weapon. The goal is to trick the email recipient into believing that the message is something they need or want. So it's usually some sort of email that's got something to do. You've won a prize. We need your information to give you to access. There's always a bit of a carrot that they dangle. So this infographic will give you a nice idea, a nice summary that we've drawn up, basically just describing what phishing is. But the bottom line is, phishing is an attack where you basically get fooled into providing a hacker or some sort of syndicate out there with the information they need to breach your security. And basically what they're after is exactly what you see there. They're after your financial information. They want your password so they could hack email accounts. They want to get hold of your identity. And basically the long-term goal of everything that they're doing is basically to just get money out of you. All of these are exploits. And they might be able to, once they're into your system, once they've got that access to your system, they can drop ransomware payloads and hold your business to ransom. So this infographic gives a nice brief explanation of phishing, and I'm welcome to share this with everybody afterwards once we're done with the presentation. Okay, and then finally, staff awareness and accountability. With phishing and fraud attempts, and with viruses and fraudulent emails, spoofing emails, staff awareness and basically accountability goes a long way in securing your network. So staff awareness, make your staff aware that there is the potential for phishing attacks. There's the potential for spoofed emails where it might look legitimate, where people are trying to access the information, where there's a lot of fraud out there. And accountability, unfortunately, people do click on links. They do open suspicious emails, and they do provide credentials. And a lot of the time they do it, they've just got a job to do and they're busy, and they click this thing and they realize far too late that they've done something. The key at this stage is that they make you aware of this, that they alert you that I did click on this link and I'm open as such. And then you can take measures in terms of protecting what's happened. A lot of the time the damage is not too bad. All you've done is given over some credentials. So if you act quickly, you can change your password, change your access, lock down, get onto your banking sites. Change passwords to anything that's got sensitive data, and that can stop obviously any potential future hacks into your business. All right, so we're going to move on to the next step, data security. As you heard before, the core of POPI is basically about data security. It's about information and sensitive information. So we're going to talk about that. So once again, identifying sensitive data. So you need to look in your business and see and identify where the sensitive data resides. Now, this is sensitive data internally. This would obviously be anything that relates to your internal business. This could be HR information. It could be financial, medical, anything personal from your employees. This can also be external information. This can be company information of your clients, their VAT numbers, bank account details, anything of a sensitive nature. You need to identify its location, and once you've got that, you basically move along to now identifying how to secure it. What you do need to do in a lot of small businesses, you may have an external accounting practice or somebody that actually handles your information for you. A lot of people do have an outsourced bookkeeper or accounting practice, some sort of confirmation from them that they are handling this information. Within POPI compliance, because these external companies are basically accessing your personal information and your client's information. So it's important that you get some sort of safeguards from them that they are doing everything in their power to secure that information as well. All right, once you've identified all the sensitive information, you need to have some sort of backup strategy in place. Now, the industry standard speaks of 3-2-1 backup strategy, and this is the accepted industry standard for ensuring that your data is always secure. Basically, what 3-2-1 backup strategy speaks about is that your data is in 3 locations at all times, 1 being the live production data, 2 being some sort of external media or backup on site. There could be an external drive, a USB, depending obviously the nature of business. And 3rd, and preferably if possible, is your data in a remote disconnected location. So in the event that you do, an unfortunate event that you do get hit with ransomware, or a hacker gets into your network, or a hacker gets onto your laptop, and they compromise that information, you've got a disconnected remote location. So backup strategy is obviously critical for any business. So based on that, what we've spoken about backup strategy, and considering the limitations for small businesses and the budget limitations, we seriously recommend, and we do put recommendations in, to look at cloud computing for small businesses. Cloud computing basically allows a small business to leverage against the security and compliance of larger corporations like Microsoft Office 365, for example. So if it's at all possible, if you have it within your budget, consider moving your sensitive data, your day-to-day information that runs your business, your email, your data, and consider moving it to some sort of cloud provider. The benefits of this is that you don't have to worry about the capital outlay. For a small business to now try and acquire the equipment, the physical servers, the physical backup devices, the physical media to implement a compliant IT system or data integrity of an IT system is just far too much for a small business. Cloud computing is there, and as long as you use a reputable company like a Microsoft, for example, they already are compliant. So you basically can leverage against their security and their reliability. Microsoft provides a 99.9% uptime percentage for Office 365 and SharePoint environments. It's almost impossible for a small business to ever get to figures like that within a constrained budget. A lot of all pretty much cloud computing comes with advanced password and multi-factor authentication. That's what MFA stands for. So you can secure your accounts and access into this information by using the tools already in place. All right. Basically, also consider is, you've identified your sensitive data, you might have you've got a backup strategy, and you could potentially move this information to the cloud. Once you've got all of this in place, data retention is something that you need to consider. You heard about that in the previous presentation, is that you need to identify what information you're storing that is of a sensitive nature, being internal or external, and the retention time and destruction policy. If you're going to keep that information, you have to motivate why you need that information. If not, have some sort of a retention policy in place that after a certain amount of time that information is destroyed and removed from your systems. Okay, mobile device management and data in transit. All right, these two go hand in hand. Mobile device management is basically devices that contain information that is of a sensitive nature. So this would basically be any laptop, any cell phone. It could be an external device. It could be a USB device. Anything that leaves your premises that moves personal information along. From what we've picked up is the POPI department is going to be very, very strict on this. So if you're unfortunate situation that you leave work or you're on your way somewhere and you stop and your laptop's in the boot of a car or your laptop's on your person, the unfortunate event that the car gets jammed, for instance, and your laptop is stolen, you're now obligated to report this to the POPI department, and this is considered a breach. They're going to ask information about what reasonable safeguards you'd put in place to secure the information on that device. Unfortunately, a password on a laptop is not going to be sufficient. Any person with a bit of IT savvy can get through a password on a laptop. So when it comes to data in transit, you need to consider encryption wherever possible. Encryption is going to be, the best safeguard to ensure that information on a laptop, on a phone, most modern phones are encrypted already, so that technology exists on the phone. But any external devices, USB devices, flash drives, external storage, anything that any time that data leaves your premise and is in transit, please make sure to encrypt it and safeguard it as best possible. All right, and then finally, disaster recovery. Even a small business can, it doesn't have to be a complicated document. Once you've identified the risks and the foreseeable risks within a business, setting up a small disaster recovery plan allows you to, have a plan of action when disaster does strike. And this can be anything from theft to fire, a cyber attack, a ransomware attack. If you've got a backup strategy, you've identified your data, and you know where your information sits and you've put reasonable safeguards in place, it's not difficult to build a small disaster recovery plan. If POPI comes knocking and you've got this in place, if there is a breach in your business, it goes a long way in ensuring your compliance and showing that you were compliant or on the road to being compliant. Okay, so we're going to move on to the final point, and we'll go into this a little bit deeper, is data loss prevention. So data loss prevention is basically within a business is the data movement from your business, wherever your information stores, to external sources. So the normal day-to-day, the biggest problem that we find, and most small businesses find, is the control of this information moving from their businesses. it's easy for anybody within your business, a staff member, anybody that has access to your information to, bring in a flash drive, plug it into your computer and copy sensitive information onto this and take it off site. So, the external storage should be something that you can lock down. Data loss prevention tools allow you to do this. A lot of endpoint protection will give you these tools already, so you don't have to get this additionally if it is a limited budget. So a lot of the endpoints out there can provide these tools as default. Online storage, we would also recommend that, besides blocking things like USB devices on computers and devices in your business, is that you will also block external online storage. Almost everybody out there's got a Gmail account. That Gmail account comes with a Google Drive or a Dropbox. They've got a Dropbox account. How do you know that your company information is not being taken off from premise and just moved to these online storage locations? This would be considered a breach. This is something that would be investigated by the POPI department. So, putting restrictions in place is just something that would be recommended. Webmail, again, it's just unfortunately everybody out there has a Gmail account. Having internal people, staff members that have access to your company information using webmail, it's just another vehicle that you're giving them opportunity for your information to leave your business and move to these unauthorized locations. Peer-to-peer and torrents, again, we spoke about that earlier. These are just dangerous websites where people share information. There's no safeguards in place. Most of the time, information transmitted between these sites comes bundled with lots of malware and ransomware. And it's just another way of people moving information from your business to an unauthorized location. And this can obviously compromise everything. Okay, and then sensitive data alerts. So, most DLP solutions, like I said, a lot of it is built into a lot of endpoint protection. So it's not an additional tool. It comes with that. Is going forward, once you've identified sensitive information in your business, it's preferable to have something in place that alerts your staff or alerts you that you're about to send sensitive information. So basically what this would provide is some sort of warning, a pop-up. You may attach a document and you're about to send an email. That document contains an ID number, a bank account number, something of medical details, whatever categories you decide. You can create all sorts of categories that are for your business, invoice numbers, anything that is considered sensitive, that would consider a breach in POPI. And you can have these pop-ups can be put in place just to warn your staff and warn yourself, just to make sure that you understand that you're about to send sensitive information. It just helps people stop, realize what they're doing. Unfortunately, it happens very often is people send information to the wrong person. Back in the day, this was just, something that was just ignored and people just left it. Unfortunately, now, if you unfortunately do send sensitive information to the wrong person, you're now obligated to now contact all the parties involved. The person you sent incorrectly, you have to ask them to destroy that information. You need confirmation that they have destroyed that. And then you need to notify the person's information that you transmitted and make them aware of it. This can now obviously lead to an investigation in your business. They might contact the POPI department and this could lead to a potential audit. So having data, safeguards, some sort of alert in place can assist in obviously preventing accidental movement of data or deliberate movement of data to the unauthorized locations. All right, so in conclusion, please remember that the Section 19 speaks of reasonable measures. Now, every business is different. Every business has different budget constraints. So, at this stage, and as you heard before, and everyone we've spoken to and attorneys, is nobody knows how deep the POPI department, how the resources of the POPI department are going to, how much pool they're going to have in going after businesses and investigating businesses. But I think they're going to look at every business in its entirety and as individuals, and you need to have what they consider reasonable measures. There unfortunately is no checklist on the in Section 19 or anywhere in the POPI Act that specifies what you need to do from an IT perspective, but it just talks about reasonable measures. So like we've discussed in here, we've gone over the fundamentals. So start with something, start getting something in place. If it's just starting with your endpoint security, that's already considered a reasonable measure, and to start planning it out there. And that obviously leads us to have a plan, you know, have something in place that you can provide, you know, document this plan, have it in place, keep it in place. If there's an investigation or POPI does come knocking, you can show them that you have a plan. I think from what everyone we've spoken to again is that if there is an investigation in your business, or if there is a breach in your business, if you can show that you have a plan and you are on the road to getting POPI compliant from an IT perspective, we feel that they're going to be more lenient with you as a business. I think they have to take in consideration budget constraints for small businesses. But if you've got something documented, and you can show that you are in the process of getting your business POPI compliant from an IT point of view, we feel that it would help a lot with the leniency of the department. Cost is obviously something that, from an IT point of view, is obviously a difficult one to factor in. Everything we've spoken about in this presentation, unfortunately, do have costs. That's why we do recommend looking at cloud solutions. You know, a lot of cloud providers out there are happy to run on a month-to-month basis. They don't require long-term commitments. Something that you can cancel, you can downsize, you can scale up and scale down as your business grows or reduces. So, you know, costs obviously are something that every business would have to be. Every business is different, and your requirements for your IT infrastructure and your data is different. But like I said, you know, consider cloud computing as an option. It saves you having to worry about a massive capital outlay, and ensuring that hardware is compliant and you have all the safeguards in place. You know, leverage against the cloud providers. They've already got everything in place, and you can leverage against that. And then finally, just create awareness. You know, create awareness in your business, create awareness with your employees, make them understand what POPI is about, make them understand the severity of sensitive information leaving the business to an unauthorized person or unauthorized device. Make them aware of the severity of data being stolen, data being taken offsite. And, you know, I think if everybody is a little bit more aware in a business, and they all understand that, you know, this can have consequences to the business and to the individual, that also helps a little bit in terms of the security and what people are doing. All right, that's the end of the presentation. There's my email address. You're all very welcome to contact me if you have any questions after this presentation, or if you just need any advice or some pointers, we're happy to take that.
Thank you so much, Ty. Thank you. And thank you for how succinct you were able to really take us through that. There's so much to get through. And thank you for taking the time to organize the information for us. I think that most of us will probably have to go and rewatch this video just to wrap our head around it. But I guess, you know, what I am gathering is, if you can, really do get in touch with somebody who can advise you and walk you through this process. I think that it's something that, you know, that plan that you were talking about, if you can, as a small business, just make that initial investment to get somebody to give you that initial plan and to help you set up that initial infrastructure. And then make sure as well that within the team, there's that allocation of responsibility to make sure that we are following through on the processes that have been put up. So thank you so much for that, Ty. So we're going to take some questions. I see Karine. It sounds like a lot for a small business. Are you able to provide some product suggestions for small businesses for each category of cybersecurity, data loss prevention, and can these products be bought online? Yeah, you can give it a bash, Ty, but I think as well, if there are some questions that you might have to just go and do some referencing, you can feed that information through to us and we can share it with the guys after the session as well. But yeah, do you have an answer for Karine?
Oh, sure. Okay, so that's why I referenced cloud computing again. So, you know, cybersecurity, data loss prevention, a lot of these tools can be separated, and that's where these costs they can escalate quite quickly. So, a decent endpoint protection. You know, obviously, we use certain products that we prefer, but a lot of these projects can be bought online. A lot of them can be bought directly from the vendor. A lot of the time, you have to go to a reseller. But if you get a decent endpoint protection, a lot of these do come with data loss prevention tools built into it. So you don't have to consider two different tools. You don't have to have the cost of extra tools. And then once again, we always double back to cloud computing. You know, having your information with a reputable service provider like Microsoft, for instance, they've already got the securities in place. It takes a lot of the responsibility off the small business. That data there is sitting in a location that is compliant and is secure. Unfortunately, online products that are free, like Dropbox free and Google Drive free, is not compliant. If your information is sitting in any of these locations and the data is lost, and there's an investigation, that would not be considered a compliant cloud provider. So it needs to be a business grade tool. Dropbox does have a business product, and so does Google Drive, and obviously Microsoft Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive. So unfortunately, there is a monthly cost, but the licenses vary, and these are month-to-month costs, so they don't have to be. There's no long-term commitment.
Okay. Thanks for that, Ty. Are there any other questions maybe from the audience?
Yeah, I see there's one about WeTransfer. Yeah, to my knowledge, WeTransfer is compliant. All the players in the IT field in South Africa have to be compliant in terms of that. WeTransfer, we would still recommend that sending sensitive information over electronic means. We'd obviously treat that with caution. Sending information, just general information that doesn't contain sensitive information, there's no risk there. But if you're going to be sending sensitive information that is either within your business or external, there are many aspects, and there's many tools that you can use to encrypt that information before it's sent. So we would recommend looking at that. But WeTransfer, to my knowledge, is secure. The data in transit is encrypted, and the data at rest is encrypted. So it is a tool that you can use.
Okay, thanks so much. Guys, we never like to keep you on here for way too long. We know that we are creeping into family time and time for everybody to wind down. And I think that there was so much information shared with us here tonight. A huge thank you to both Moshami and Ty for really just preparing and all the work that went into putting this information together for us. Again, my encouragement is going to be for everybody to go and have a look at the content once more on our YouTube platform. If there's anything that you've missed, if there's any questions that you may have, please do feel free to also just chat to us on our social media platforms. I would recommend Instagram. If you perhaps just drop us a DM on Instagram, or even if you comment in the chat section of that YouTube video, we will do our best to come back to you as best as we can. But yeah, that's all for tonight's session. Thank you for joining us. We'd just like to let you know that for next month, we are talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. For those of you who know, the 1st of January was the official kickoff of this agreement between the countries all across our continent. Really, the rationale around it is to make trade and to make business across our continent easier, better, cheaper. And of course, sometimes when these agreements come into effect, the people who benefit the most are the people who have the time to read up on it, to understand it, the bigger businesses and bigger corporate organizations. And as it is Heritage Month, what we have decided to do is take a Pan-African view in terms of thinking about our heritage and pulling in various voices to really unpack what this agreement means for the small business owner, to understand how you can make the most of it for your own business. So if you know people, especially in the retail space, especially people wanting to trade in products and expand their markets beyond the borders of South Africa, please do share the information that the session is taking place on the 30th of September. It's going to be a Thursday evening just like this. And yeah, we will be sharing the email with the links to register. It's going to be a free session again. Watch out for the content on our social media platforms in the upcoming months, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for spending your evening with us, and have a wonderful Friday and a beautiful weekend.